Shi Jin Chao. Shi Jin Chao. Gung Hei Fat Choi. That is Happy New Year. Good. Did I get it right? Well, it was close. And then the second one is what? Wealth and prosperity? Yeah. Okay, good. It's the Lunar New Year on Saturday, the Chinese New Year. And this is the year of the rooster. So you might want to look that up to see what you are and what that means for your success in the course. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The topic for today's discussion is to turn our attention to the foundations of economics. And I know you've all had principles in micro and so forth, but I like to rebuild the basic foundation so that we're all on the same page. We all have the same understanding of how the theory is built and how we go about applying the theory, and with some implications that may not have been discussed by other faculty. So I define economics as a science that studies how individuals behave in this world of what we call scarcity. So it's really the study of people making choices. People making choices is what the topic is all about. And I call it a science because we're going to employ what's called the scientific method in applying our study and building our theories. And that means that we're going to be using what's called positive analysis as opposed to normative statements. The term positive means a factual, descriptive statement about reality. It's an objective statement. It simply is a statement of facts. The lights in this room generate 12 lumens per square foot. The walls are gray. You're wearing a plaid shirt. Those are just factual observations of reality. That's what positive statements are. And then normative statements describe what ought to be, what we should be doing in that way. The catchphrase that students often use to remember the two is positive describes what is, and normative describes what should be. So that's the little, way of thinking about comparing the two. Normative statements are things like we should raise the minimum wage. We ought to raise taxes on the top 1% in society. And those two are easy to know they're normative because I use the word should and ought to. So if you see that right away, you know that's a normative statement, right? But one of the key skills that you really want to develop being here in the business school is the ability to listen to an argument in a presentation or a speech or read an article or a blog and be thinking about it in this way. What parts of this are simply positive analysis and what parts of it are normative? Because normative means somebody's making a value judgment. Somebody's saying this is better than that, or society would be better off if we do this. Economists on these panels, all these pundit panels on CNN and Fox, etc., often do give recommendations. I mean, they will say, we ought to do this, we ought to do that. But that is not the science of economics. That is their personal opinion about what in fact, should be done. So it's an important test because if it's a positive statement, you can go out and estimate if it's true or not, right? That's what it means. It's testable in some manner. You can estimate whether it's a factual statement. Positive does not mean correct. Positive means a factual claim. The people in this room are women. That's a factual statement. Turns out it's not true, but it is a factual statement. Everybody with me? So just expressing things that are observations may or may not be accurate, but as long as there's no judgment being made, it is an objective, a positive statement. Let me give you an example. The population of Los Angeles is growing at 7% per year. Positive or normative? Positive, just estimate of how fast they're growing. Los Angeles City is currently using 98.5% of its water treatment facility. Positive, good. But the engineers, when they go before the city council, they put this together as a, quote, logical argument. We're growing at 7% per year on average, and we're at 98.5% capacity. So Los Angeles needs to build a new water treatment facility. It is normative, good. And the way that it slips in is through the use of the word needs. The use of the word needs. I want you all to write the word needs on in your notes. Good. Draw an X through the word. Draw an X through the word. Because, and that's why I wanted you to do it that way, because within economics, the use of the word needs is a normative statement. And I will describe how we can make statements that say there are no needs. There are no needs. Because everything is a matter of degree. And we'll get to much more of that discussion later on. So they make the presentation to City Council. Let me assume that you all live within the geographic region of the City of Los Angeles, the boundaries. And City Council says, well, that's obvious. We need to do that. So they have to pay for it. So they decide to levy a head tax, which is a per-person tax, of $10,000 on each of the residents that live in LA City in order to raise the funds. It costs $200 million to build this thing. And so you get a bill for $10,000 from the City Council. And it says, you know, like they all do, here's all the stuff and so forth. And so therefore, your tax bill is $10,000 due and payable in 30 days. Good. What is your name? Lauren. Lauren, right. How do you like it? How do you like? You just got a bill for $10,000.
I'm not too happy about it.
Good. When you're upset, who do you talk to first?
Probably my boyfriend, even though he doesn't want to hear it.
That's a normative step. No. Yeah, we talk to our friends, right? The first thing we do is talk to our friends. And you call somebody up and they say, yeah, I got the same damn bill. What the hell is that all about? The next level is the public discussion, and that is you write op-ed pieces to the newspaper, or they send out reporters to interview people about this particular situation. Your name is?
James.
James gets interviewed, and James says, yeah, well, you know, LA's growing, and obviously we have to have a sewer system, so it seems to make sense to me. And then, what is your name? Elizabeth? They interview Elizabeth, and she just goes off the charts, right? Like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. This is ridiculous. How do you expect us to pay $10,000 a piece? Why don't you do a bond issue, do something else? But I can't even afford to buy tennis shoes for my daughter, so don't even talk to me about this. Okay, which of those two interviews will be played on the air? Which of them? The second one. The reason I'm using this as an example is I'm allowed, I think I said last time, to distribute wisdom as well as teach theory. And in your lives, 70% of the things that you hear are not true. 70% of the things you hear are not true. On the pundits on CNN, definitely from Washington, maybe the percentage is even higher now. But a lot of what you hear is not true, particularly the things that are negative, particularly the things that are in fact negative. The reason for that is multiple. One, they may just have made a mistake, right? They may say something and they think that is true and it's not, right? That's number one. Number two, they know what they're saying is not true, but they're trying to convince you, right, that this is what you ought to believe is true for their own purposes. And then third, and one of the most common areas, is that statements are made that are not accurate, and then they get interpreted by other people. One of the difficulties Trump has had, not being a politician, is that he's made certain pronouncements, and then the press, which generally is leftward leaning in the country, the press will take whatever the statement is and define it as being the worst interpretation possible. Y'all with me? He used the word ban on this Muslim thing, and now that's what's being bannered back and forth. Well, he called it a ban, and so did Sean, and then Sean said it's not a ban. Well, if you actually read the executive order, it is a requirement to suspend allowing people to come in for a certain number of days. I think it's 60 days in one country and 120 in another, in order to investigate what we are doing in terms of vetting and then what things could be done to do it better. But it is not a long-term ban. But you all see what my point is? Words can be interpreted to mean different things, and that's where a lot of this uncertainty arises in studying those kinds of activities. Good. So you just got a bill for $10,000. What are you going to do?
Figure out a way to get it waived.
Dad? You could try to get a waiver. No waivers. Right. Yeah, good. Protest. Right. And no, you wouldn't. People go down to City Hall like they're doing now and out in the streets and stuff. But it turns out that it's totally legal, and that you don't have enough people to get them thrown out of office. Let me ask the question a different way. The tax applies to the people who live in the geographic confines of LA City. What action could you take to avoid paying the tax? Good. Move out, right? You're on a boundary street, right? Your side is LA, the other side's Culver City. There's an apartment building right over there just like yours. Move out of LA, move into Culver City. You don't pay the bill, right? Everybody with me? A colleague of mine out of University of Washington named Charlie Tybalt created this analysis many years ago, and he called voting with your feet. Voting with your feet. And he got like 4 different articles out of it because he was showing in so many different ways that whatever the circumstance is, it may be eliminated by people simply voting with their feet. In California, there's very high workman's compensation insurance premiums for major firms. And many firms have voted with their feet and moved the operations out of the state that use a lot of people because they're saving a lot in that. And in fact, if you have an account with Wells Fargo and you ever find out and you ever actually get into it, your checks are being processed in Virginia. And the reason is that the cost is much lower in that particular location. Good. So and then we finally come to the point. Well, what happened to the need for this? Well, the need's gone, right? Because the population's declining instead of increasing. So it's an example of mixing normative with positive, and it is not a logical outcome once you include the payment activity. So the construction of economic theory, in fact, the construction of scientific theory, basically follows this path. We begin by looking out at reality, and we think about a problem we'd be interested in evaluating or solving. So we abstract from all the details and just focus in on those characteristics that we think would be helpful in understanding the problem or in solving the problem. What is your name? Andy? Andy, suppose I give you the task of identifying the people in this room who are likely to play basketball well. What characteristic would you focus on?
Height.
Height. Why?
If you watch the NBA, most of them are tall.
Good. So Andy thought about it. He said, well, I have some experience and information about the game. And when I observe the pros, they're all really big guys. So it's likely that is a positive characteristic. Right, good. How might you have come to the same characteristic by a different venue? How might you have reached the same conclusion that height was important?
Basket is high.
Huh?
Basket is high. Basket is high.
Yeah. The basket's 10 feet off the ground. So just logically, you'd think, well, if a person's taller, it's easier for them to throw the orange ball through, so that probably is a benefit in that way. So that's what abstraction is all about. It's looking out at all the details and then only focusing on those that you think are significant to solve a particular problem. If you incorporate all the details in your analysis, then the theory cannot be generalized because it only applies when all those facts are included or the same. Y'all with me? If I tried to do it and I got down all the things you're wearing and how you're sitting and what you're writing with and all these details, then if I wanted to use that as the basis for building a predictive model, It would only apply when all those things were the same in the new group. So that's the benefit of abstraction, is that it allows you to focus on just certain characteristics. Then if I see those characteristics again, I can make a prediction, but it's not tied to all the individual facts that are not of significance in doing it. Good. The next step is to make up words to describe reality, to make up terminology. And I said to you last week, definitions are key to really doing well in the course. And the problem for you is we've been doing this for a long time. So there's 250 different definitions that you'll need to know. Most of them you already know from 160 and 310, but you have to own these. You have to own the terminology. If we look at where definitions come from, or how people learn words and what they mean, young children are almost always taught words in pairs. So they learn that something is in the house or out, it's up or down, it's left or right, it's hot or cold, it's man or woman, it is fat and thin or thin, it is black or white, it is Christian or Muslim, it is Arab or Jew. People tend to look at the world in many things in this bipolar way, this thing about it's this or in fact it is this. Economists approach the study of people by thinking instead of the world existing in a continuum of matters of degree. Continuum of matters of degree. I would suggest to you that almost all of the major problems that exist in the world and that have existed in the past between nations and so forth have come about because of this bipolar way of thinking. This bipolar way of thinking. There was a book written several years ago called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And the key point of the book was saying that men are from Mars, which is the red, warlike planet. And so men think in that way. They think in a certain way like that. And women are from Venus. And Venus is a much smaller planet, and it's much closer to the sun. And the sun is from which we get the light, which helps us survive, and the heat of the sun. And some would say the wisdom of God, because that's the center of energy that's coming out. So women are closer to God than men. And my response is there a difference between men and women? The answer is, of course there is. Viva la différence, right? I mean, it's great that there's a difference. But if you stop and think about it, we are all 99.3% the same. I know we differ by, the sex of the body, but we're the same. We want the same things. We want safety. We want good food. We want we want knowledge. We want more physical abilities. We want good food, good things to do, good exercises, good safe kids, schools for the kids, and so forth. Everybody wants those things. It's the same, and the same is true of so many of these other wars that have taken place, or today all of the fighting that's going on around the world is because people are thinking about things in this bipolar way. One of the best examples was, for years there was a major war between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, and they were killing each other. And then Northern Ireland formed an army named Sinn Féin, and they got guns and they went out and killed people. And you killed my brother, so I'm going to burn down your church and kill your kids. And it went back and forth like this for a long, long time. What was the difference between the two groups?
Protestant Catholic.
Yeah, the North had been many people from England had come in and lived in the North, and they were Protestants, and then the Catholics lived in the South, and were there for a longer period of time. Those are both Christian religions. Y'all with me? They're both Christian religions. They both believe in Christ. Yeah, the Catholics used to do a lot of stuff in Latin, and the Protestants have some variations of interpretation. But they're both Christian religions. And here they are, just out killing each other. Just fighting and killing and stuff. Because if you're a Catholic, you're bad. and the other way around. If you're a Protestant, you're a bad person, and we're going to destroy you because you're Protestant in that way. So the same thing's true in the East Bank, in the West Bank. The Arabs and Jews all want the same things. They want peace. They want a good job and so forth. It's true all over the world, but the problems arise. And then in Iraq, it was Shia versus Sunni, which are both Muslim faiths. But there's the same thing. No, it matters whether you're this group or that group. So as I said, economists go beyond that, and we examine the world in matters of degree along a continuum. In fact, even with the man and woman thing, I would argue to you that if you look at people, some women are extremely feminine. Some women are really extremely feminine. And then some are kind of average feminine, and then some are somewhat masculine. And then among guys, some are very effeminate, right? And then some are in the middle, and then some are extremely masculine. So there is a spectrum. There is a matter of degree. So definitions break up the spectrum into its parts. Definitions break up where you are on that continuum. When children were first taught about colors, except in the United States, they were given a little piece of cardboard, and it had the three primary colors: red, yellow, and blue. And so you taught the child, this one is red, this one's blue, this one's yellow. Y'all with me? Good. So they know what red is. They know exactly what red is. It's right there. And what's blue? It's right there. Then you introduce to them the idea of mixing the colors. And if you mix red and yellow together, you get a new color, which is what? Orange. And if you mix yellow and blue together, you get a new color, which is green. What's fascinating in working with the kids is that, as I said, they know exactly what red is. Red is only that, and blue. But orange is this really slippery term, because it could be almost all red with a little tiny bit of yellow, that deep orange, or it could be almost all yellow, little tiny bit of red, still called orange. Same thing with green. You can have a really ugly yellowish green or a really attractive blue green. That's my taste and preference. So those words are difficult for them because they cover a larger spectrum on that continuum. You got to high school, you got to junior high, and you learned that color arises from breaking down light into different lengths of wavelengths. They showed you a prism and how it breaks the light down, and you learned the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and then you learned two new sexy colors, indigo and violet, at the end. And you memorized that with what word? Roy G. Biv. Good. In England, they memorized it by the word Gibveroy, which is fascinating because it's Roy G. Biv spelled backwards. But I thought it was really interesting that for some reason, that's their word and we had this word. So you graduate from Seaside, you're making a lot of money, you buy a house, you build a house out in Thousand Oaks, and you hire an interior decorator to come in and assist you in design. And he's an expert, and he charges $3,000, and he comes out and meets with you and wants to talk about your personality and your activities, and then looks at the house and looks at where the windows are and where the lighting is. And if you have a significant other, at the time, be sure she's included in the meeting with the interior decorator. Just a little bit of a true, anyway, be sure she's included. So the guy goes away and he comes back after 2 weeks and he's brought some diagrams of the house and stuff, and he said, well, I thought about your personality and the house, and so I'm going to recommend that we do the kitchen in yellow, we do the living room in blue, and we do the bedroom in red. What is your opinion of the quality of this guy? He's terrible, right? Those are elementary school words, right? You don't want to hear red and so forth. You want to hear, oh no, where is it? Well, it came up. No, that's not it. Well, I don't have the slide. I did a slide that has all these different colors. You want to hear things like mauve, right? Deep mauve. You want to hear not yellow, but sunrise, morning rising sunshine yellow, right? In the kitchen, he said, we're going to do the seating area, and it's going to be, it goes from sand to deep sand. Now you're talking, right? Now you're using advanced language. So that's the point I'm making, is that definitions divide up the spectrum, and the more advanced the problem is, the more specific you want to get in that. The term white is not, there's not just one white. There's all these different kinds of white. There's Navajo white. There's cream, right? There's oyster white. There's actually one called Swiss coffee. And I said, well, that's not white. Yeah, it's Swiss coffee. It's white with a little tiny bit of brown involved. So in more advanced problems, you want to break it up into smaller and smaller increments to solve it. So economics does that with using what we call marginal analysis, and that is we study how things change on the margin. And so we'll look at what is the value of one more Heineken's beer, marginal value of each additional unit. What is the additional revenue coming into the firm of each additional unit that you've sold? What is the additional cost of production of each additional unit in that way? So that's what economics focuses on, is this, as I said, marginal analysis to make these, to build the models and make these distinctions. So we start with abstractions, we define terms, and then we establish what are called the assumptions of the model. The assumptions of the model. And those are, like I'm looking at tall people probably play well, those are the insights, the factual insights that you have that you think will generate some kind of effect on the outcome, that will influence the outcome. And the outcome then is described as the implications of the theory. You establish the assumptions, then you close the window on reality, and you simply think logically. If these things are true, what would I expect to see? What would I expect to see as a result of that? So theory is almost always expressed as what's called a hypothesis, and it is an if-then kind of statement. If, and then you state the assumptions of the model, then you state the implications. So if A happens, then B is predicted to happen as a result of that. Good. Give me an example. The sun, a large gaseous ball generating heat and light, rises in the east and sets in the west. Positive or normative? Positive, just descriptive statement, right? The sun, large gaseous ball generating heat and light, rises in the east and sets in the west. What definitions would you have to know to understand that assumption? What terms would you have to know? Good, rises and sets. So rises means appears above the horizon, sets means disappears below the horizon. What else do you need to know? East and west. So you need to know north, south, east, and west, and those kinds of things. And sun, a large gaseous ball generating heat and light. If that is accurate, if that's a factual description, what things would you expect to see as a result of that? In other words, if that's what actually happens every day, what things could I predict I would see as a result of that? Sun rises in the east, sets in the west. If you see the sun rising, what direction must you be looking in? To the east. Good. If you're looking straight ahead and you see the sun rising on your left and you're facing north, it doesn't work. If you're looking north and you see the sun rising on your right-hand side, then it's rising in the east, and you would know that, etc. Good. What else could you predict? Remember, it generates light and heat as it comes up and as it goes across the sky. It's generating light and heat. So what other conclusions could you draw?
It's hottest in the midday.
Okay, good. That might be it. Yeah, because it's been up the longest, right, at that point, or it's at the epigee of its orbit. Good. If your house faces north, what bedrooms will heat up first? The ones on the east, right? And they'll become light first, and then the opposite at the end of the day. The rooms on the west side will remain lighted longer than those on the east side, and remain heated more than those on the east side. You can predict about shadows. Since the sun's coming up in the east, where are the shadows initially? Look at just visualize the house. The sun's coming up in the east. Shadows are where? On the west. Good. And then as the sun goes up, the shadows move in the opposite direction. Good. So you could do that. It is noon in, if we define noon as the middle of the day, it is noon in Baltimore, Maryland, before it's noon in St. Louis, before it's noon in Chicago, before it's noon in Seattle. Again, if the sun's going across, then that would be an implication of the model. Good. So that's how you build the theory. You start with your observation. Then you say, if this is true, what things would I expect to see follow from that? Every time I see that, if the sun does that, I would expect to see these particular things. So that's how you develop the theory. And as we said, it is usually expressed as if A, then B. If the assumptions are true, then I predict the implications. In your classes and in your life, you will be exposed to many conflicting theories. And you want to know how to decide which theory to use to make your decisions and so forth. So my example is this. Suppose you want to know if there's going to be an earthquake next Thursday on the southern half of the San Andreas Fault. Because right now you're planning to attend a class on Thursday and you want to know if it's going to be safe to do that. What science would you go to get a prediction for earthquakes? Seismology, subset of geology. Where are they located in Southern California? Where do they always go when there's an earthquake? Yeah, Caltech, good. And Nancy Smith and Kate Hutton are the two women who are with the National, whatever it is, Society. Good. And anytime there's a tremor, all the reporters go racing out with a microphone like, what was that? And Kate Hutton has a great sense of humor. And she says, that was an earthquake. Well, do you think we're going to have a larger one? Well, if a larger one comes, then we'll call this a pre-shock. If a larger one does not come, then we'll call this an aftershock of a previous greater shock. Would you anticipate we'll have more? Oh, yeah. If you've ever seen the map, by the way, Southern California is just covered with fault lines all over it. So you say to her, what's the probability of a quake next Thursday? And they say, I don't know. I can't determine that. And you say, well, do you have any predictions about quakes? Well, there is a standing prediction right now, and it's based on the model that the Earth is a molten core, that there are large tectonic masses of Earth that are floating on top of that, and they run into each other, and all of them agree that the United States continental plate is drifting westward and southward, and the Pacific plate is drifting northward and eastward, and they come up against each other along the San Andreas Fault line. And if it was a straight line, they could actually slip past each other, but it's not. There's a 23-mile, across the top of the San Fernando Valley, there's a 23-mile indentation in it, and then it runs down through Los Angeles. So the two land masses are locked. And according to their theory, pressure builds up as these gigantic plates are continuing to push, and pressure builds up along the edge where the two come together. And at some point, the pressure is so great that all the rocks along that edge just blow up, right? Because they just can't stand the pressure. And that's what the earthquake actually is. The Northridge quake on January 17th of 93 raised the mountains on the north side of the valley by 16 inches and moved the mountains 6 inches, I think it was to the west, in one direction or the other. So you can imagine the amount of energy we're talking about, right? Just to lift the whole landmass up 16 inches, just amazing amounts of energy. Say, would you have a theory at all? Well, they do have a theory, and the theory is that within the next 10 years, there will be a major quake above 6.7 on the southern half of the San Andreas Fault at some time during the 10-year period. Now, it's interesting that it's now a 10-year model, because up until 5 years ago, it was a 20-year model. and then they've revised it, and UCLA revised theirs also. So there is a prediction about that. Well, if you know that they're predicting a quake in a 10-year period, then you can calculate the cumulative probability of a quake on any given day just by mathematics. And so there is a way to determine what that number is. We're now 2 years into the 10-year period, so it's 8 years, and the cumulative probability at this point is 0.000342. Very, very small probability based on that model. Suppose that there's another group that predicts earthquakes, and it is a couple from South America, and they have predicted correctly the last 8 major earthquakes all over the world to the city and the day. And you know this. In other words, you actually saw the prediction and you saw the quake. Everybody with me? Over and over again. They predicted it on the Tonight Show. It went 2 weeks later in Kobe, Japan. They predicted it with Katie Couric on the Today Show. Northridge went on January 17th, just as predicted. 8 major quakes to the city and the day. And they've never made a wrong prediction. They've never predicted one that did not occur. Everybody with me? They have a 100% accuracy rating on their predictions. They now predict there will be a quake next Thursday on the southern half of the San Andreas fault line. And the method they use is they measure changes in the growth rate of the hair on the hind legs of bats. That's their methodology. They measure changes in the growth rate of the hairs, and from that they develop these predictions about earthquakes. It's not any bat, that would be stupid, right? It's bats in a particular cave in South America. They come out and say there's going to be an earthquake next Thursday. So you have 2 competing theories here. You have 2 competing theories. The Caltech says the chance with all their machinery and everything else, equations and stuff, the chance next Thursday is 0.000342. The bat people say the chance is 100%. There's going to be an earthquake. So in listening to those 2 theories, which of those 2 theories would you adopt in making your decision about what to do next Thursday? How many of you would vote for the bat people? 100% right, 8 times in a row, never wrong. Usually more of you raise your hand. I love to do this because, number one, the people who vote for the bat people go like, oh God, I'm voting for the bat people, right? But the reason I make that so significant is exactly that point. You adopt a theory based on how well the theory predicts. You don't adopt it based on how many equations there are, how many hundreds of dollars have been spent on equipment to measure stuff, and how realistic the assumptions seem to be. You adopt theories based on how well the theory predicts. You'll be exposed to conflicting theories in all your classes here at school. You'll get all kinds of different predictions. In psychology, there's a thing called Maslow's triangle of needs, and Maslow's theory is that people have to satisfy the basic level things in their life, which is food and procreation, before they attempt to use any resources to do the next thing up. And the next thing I think might be education or something. And you have to totally get that 100% before you dedicate any resources to personal relationships, or the final pinnacle is self-actualization. Well, that's totally contrary to what economists assume. Economists assume you make trade-offs all the time. You know, you're really hungry, but you want to meet with somebody. So you put off eating, right, to do that. People make trade-offs all the time. So you have conflicting theories. There's a very popular economic theory that a lot of people believe, and that is that the entire world economy is run by a small group of white men. Small group of white men. One theory is Jewish white men. Another theory is it is the members who go to Davos, Switzerland every year in January. Davos has a big meeting of major people, business people, scientists, poets, musicians, politicians, and they all meet in Davos for about a week, and they have sessions on different topics, and they talk about what's happening and, you know, better understand what the world is actually doing. But the theory is that they decide everything. They decide everything. 8 years ago, they said, let's put a black guy in as president of the United States. Let's see how that's going to work out, right? And they control all the products that you buy through subliminal advertising, and they make you buy the products that they produce, whether you want them or not, through this advertising. And for jobs, if you're a woman, you're never going to get equal pay because these guys are all men, right? And no, we're not going to give equal pay to women. And if you're a minority, you're lucky you even get a job, right? Because we don't want those minority people in here. It's very popular because it absolves the individual of all responsibility about the outcome of your life. If you believe that theory, and there are a lot of people who do, a lot of people really do believe that theory, doesn't matter what you do, because no matter what you do, you're not going to earn as much as other people, right? And you're not going to get a better job. It's all predetermined by these people, and they ruin everybody's lives and so forth. The economic theory that I'll take 5 or 6 weeks to develop, the micro foundations, is obviously much more complex than that. I just explained that theory in 2 minutes. But after you've studied this and understand the elements involved in the analysis, you're going to be able to answer a lot more questions about what you see out there. Why did this price go up? Well, let's see what happened to the price of substitutes. Let's see what happened to taste and preference. Let's see what happened to factors that determine demand and supply in that particular way. And the economic model is based on the assumption that your future outcome is primarily determined by your own behavior. Your future outcome is in your hands. It's determined by what you decide to do with this resource, which is all the skills and abilities that you have in that particular way. A lot of young people think that the outcome in business is by chance. A lot of young people think that, you know, the guy who's the CEO of General Electric, he just got lucky. He was on an airplane and he met somebody, right? And they had a martini and the guy liked him, and so they promoted him, and that's how he got the job. And if I had just been on the plane, I make a mean martini, right? I could have gotten the job and so forth. But there are people who really believe it's luck. There is a lot of luck in life. There's definitely a lot of luck in life. I know that from experience. But the primary determinant is what you've chosen to do, what you've chosen to invest in, what skills you're developing, and those factors. And that is a much more hopeful way of understanding the world than this other thing that just says you don't stand a chance in any way. Good. So to build up economic theory, I start with defining terms. We define a good as being something, anything that an individual wants to have more of, measured at zero price. So goods are the things we would like to have. Goods are the things we'd like to have. There's lots of materialistic things we would like to have. A better car, a better stereo, better, and then abilities, better tennis game, and all these things we'd like to have. But it applies also to all these non-material things in your life that bring you satisfaction. That's why it says anything is material or non-material. A lot of our satisfaction in life comes from other people and the interaction with other people. Love, relationships, honesty, respect, playing sports games, talking to other people. A lot of the things that bring us joy and happiness are devolved from our interactions with other individuals. Resources, you know what they are. You studied them before: land, labor, and capital. Land is also sometimes called natural resources. Labor is simply people. Capital within economics is real stuff, buildings and equipment. In finance, capital may mean money. In economics, money means money, and capital means stuff, real stuff. I add into this resource of time. And when I ask students, when I do this more extended analysis, and I ask students, what do you want more of? Often somebody will say time. I want more time. And number one, I don't know how to do that. There was a book published 10 years ago called Vox, and the protagonist was able to snap his fingers and time stopped, but he went on living, and so that was a way he could stop time and have more time. But I consider it more as a resource, because if you think about it, everything you do uses up time. Time is an input, right? And it's scarce. It's a scarce good. Whether you're eating a meal, you're watching the Warriors, or playing a game, or whatever you're doing, time is being used up as an input. So I consider it to be a major category of resource, and probably your most scarce resource. In all the things you try to do, time is probably your most scarce resource to be allocated. So the assumptions are very simple at the beginning. People want more. Human beings want more. No matter how wealthy they are, they want more. Or no matter how knowledgeable they are, they want to have more knowledge, and more knowledge of the deity and what lies beyond the stars and these kinds of things. So people are greedy. And this is a link that you can tap on, and Milton Friedman is being interviewed, and he does a 5-minute video on greed. And it's really an interesting discussion. He often says on there that, you're not greedy. Other people are greedy, right? And then he says, we're all greedy, right? Everybody wants more. That's what greed really means in that particular way. We are the dismal science because the next assumption is we have limited resources. We don't have enough to do all the things we would in fact like to do. And so we're constrained by these limited resources against unlimited desires. The term we use to describe that situation is called scarcity, and it basically says, as an individual or a family or a city or a state or a nation or the world, we don't have enough resources to do all the things we would in fact like to do. We just don't, because we want to do lots of different things. So the term scarce is defined as an adjective to the word good, and you need to see this and understand the distinction. A scarce good means that the amount you'd like to have is more than what's available. So the good is scarce. The amount desired at zero price, more than what's being made available at zero price. A free good is the opposite, and that is, a free good is a good for which the amount available at zero price is more than what people desire. A scarce good will command a positive price, and in an exchange system, a free good will not. Clean air in Montana is a free good. Y'all with me? There's people that live there, but there's lots of free air, clean air, right? So that's a free good. Clean air in downtown Los Angeles, scarce good, right? And we know that because we see equipment being used to clean up the air and change the humidity and particulate matter, etc. In 1969, we sent the men up to the moon. They came back with this picture, and it was it had a striking effect on the world's use of resources, because it's the first time we had ever actually seen what scientists told us we were on. And there it is. It's the ball, and it's surrounded by space, which is a partial vacuum. You can't live in it, and the temperature is way below what you could sustain you. So that's all there is. That's all there is. That's the whole ball of resources that are available. And as I said, it really had a big effect on conservation thinking. Books came out like The Good Spaceship Earth. Another one was Silent Green, about the use of resources, and it had a significant effect on everybody's understanding of scarcity, right? That there it is. And if you use it up now, it's not available for generations later. So be careful how you use it. What has come out of that, as you all know, is now the discussion is sustainability, right? And the idea is to substitute resources that can be repeated, like lumber, to provide for an ongoing source of